The afternoon sun beat down on the quiet streets of downtown Charleston, South Carolina. It was one of those days where everything seemed calm on the surface, like the world was just going about its business. Cars passed slowly, people walked, with coffee cups in hand, and the soft sounds of a saxophone played from a nearby corner. But peace can be deceiving. Sometimes, what looks calm is just the moment before the storm. That was the kind of day Jason Cole found himself in. Jason was not someone who stood out in a crowd unless you really looked. Dressed in a plain black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, he moved with a quiet confidence that came from years of discipline and training. Most people who passed him had no idea that Jason was more than just another man walking through town. They did not know he had served his country with distinction. They could not tell from a glance that he was a decorated Navy SEAL, one of the best. He had risked his life on foreign soil more times than he could count, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. To protect people, to protect freedom. But none of that mattered when it happened. Jason had stopped outside a local diner to answer a quick call. His voice was calm, respectful, as he spoke to his mother about meeting for dinner later that night. That is when a police cruiser pulled up beside him. The car idled for a second, then the door opened and out stepped an officer. Tall, lean, with mirrored sunglasses and a look on his face that said he already had something on his mind. "Hey!" the officer barked. "What are you doing here?" Jason turned slowly, still holding his phone. "Just taking a call, sir. I'm not causing any trouble." But the officer, whose name badge read R. Haskins, was already sizing him up with narrowed eyes. There was something in the way he looked at Jason. A kind of assumption, a judgment made without a word being spoken. He did not see a war hero. He did not see a man who had saved lives and endured the worst conditions on earth. No. What Officer Haskins saw was the color of Jason's skin, and to him that was reason enough. "I need to see your ID. Now," the officer snapped, hand already resting near his holster. Jason stayed calm. Years of military training taught him how to deal with stress, how to handle dangerous situations without making them worse. He reached slowly for his wallet. "Of course, sir. But may I ask what the issue is?" "The issue," Haskins said, stepping closer, "is that you're loitering outside a business and acting suspicious." Jason handed over his ID. "I was just standing here making a phone call, that's all." But Haskins did not care. He barely glanced at the ID before scoffing. "Jason Cole, you military or something?" "Yes, sir," Jason said evenly. "Navy SEAL. Recently. Returned home." Haskins chuckled, not kindly. "Yeah? You expect me to believe that?" Jason looked him in the eye. Not angry, not afraid, just firm. "You can run my name. I have nothing to hide." More people were beginning to notice now. A couple inside the diner pressed their faces to the window. A woman with her 2 children slowed her pace and watched from the sidewalk. And still, Haskins kept pushing. "You're talking back a lot for someone just taking a phone call," he said. "Maybe I should search you. Got anything illegal on you?" Jason's jaw tightened, not in fear, in disappointment. He had seen men like this before, in foreign lands, in war zones, even on American soil. Men who used power as a weapon instead of a shield. But he also knew better than to raise his voice. Not yet. Not unless it became necessary. "I do not consent to a search," Jason said calmly. "I have done nothing wrong." And that was all it took. Suddenly Haskins stepped forward, grabbing Jason's arm roughly. The situation escalated fast. Too fast. The phone Jason was holding clattered to the ground. Bystanders gasped. A child asked his mother, "Why is that man being grabbed?" But Jason did not resist. Not yet. He kept his breathing steady, letting instinct take over. This was not a battlefield. He was not overseas. But in that moment, the same principles applied. Stay calm, assess, control the situation without violence, if possible. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Haskins demanded, ignoring the growing crowd, ignoring the truth. Sir, you are making a mistake, Jason said. His voice never rose. It never wavered. And that is when someone else stepped. A woman with a bright blue scarf and a phone in her hand stepped closer, filming. He didn't do anything. You're harassing him. Back away, ma'am, Haskins barked. He's a Navy SEAL, she shouted back. Are you serious right now? But the damage had already begun. Jason stood there, calm but restrained, while the officer seemed determined to make a point. The crowd grew. The tension thickened. And the truth hovered in the air like a storm cloud. What Officer Haskins did not know, what he could not possibly have imagined, was who he had just messed with. Jason had spent his life facing danger that would break most men. He had led missions deep behind enemy lines. He had been trained to survive the impossible. And more than that, he had spent years learning how to remain composed, even when everything inside told him to fight. He could have ended the situation in a second. He had the strength, the skill, and the training to do so. But he chose not to. Not yet. Because this was bigger than one bad officer. This was about something deeper. Something Jason had faced his entire life. And today he was going to handle it differently, not with fists. Not with violence, but with truth. The kind that could not be ignored. The kind that left a mark. And as the crowd closed in and more phones began to record, the moment stretched. A pause. A breath. Just before everything changed. Because Jason was not just another man on the street. And this story was far from over. What happened next? Well, that is where the lesson began. Jason stood there, still as stone, as Officer Haskins tightened his grip. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked into place, biting into Jason's wrists. His muscles tensed not from pain but from control. He could have easily broken out of the grip, reversed the hold, and dropped the officer flat in seconds. But instead he stayed silent. Calm. His eyes scanned the crowd, locking briefly with the woman in the blue scarf. She was still filming, her voice shaky but firm as she told others what was happening. Her camera was steady now, trained on the scene like she knew this might be important, because it was. Jason's phone still lay on the ground beside them. The call with his mother had disconnected, but not before she heard the sharp change in tone, the sudden scuffle, and her son saying, "Sir, you're making a mistake." She had tried calling back, but the line stayed unanswered, and now worry pulsed through her like a drumbeat. As Haskins led Jason toward the police cruiser, the murmurs around them grew louder. This is wrong. He wasn't doing anything. Why are they arresting him? People whispered, but no one stepped closer. Fear kept them frozen. They knew how quickly things could turn when law enforcement got involved, especially in a situation like this. Jason was used to tension. He had operated under pressure more intense than most people could ever imagine. But this felt different. This was not a war zone. This was home. This was supposed to be the place he had fought to protect. And yet, here he was, treated like a criminal for standing on a sidewalk making a phone call. As he was pushed into the back seat of the cruiser, Jason said quietly, "This won't end how you think." Haskins looked at him through the rearview mirror, a smirk tugging at his mouth. "We'll see about that." The car rolled forward, but Jason's mind was not focused on the ride. He was thinking back, thinking about how all this started. Growing up in the South, Jason had learned early what it meant to walk a line, to be polite, to be respectful, to lower his voice even when he was right. He had learned how to keep his hands visible, how to move slowly, how to explain himself before anyone even asked. His mother had taught him these things, not because he was a troublemaker, but because she feared what the world might do to him, simply for existing the way he did. Even when he joined the Navy, those lessons followed him. He rose through the ranks, became one of the youngest SEALs in his unit, and earned the respect of his team not just through strength, but through integrity. He had seen his brothers fall in battle, had carried their memories with him across oceans. He had saved lives under fire, pulled civilians from burning wreckage, and volunteered for missions no one else wanted. But medals and stripes could not shield him from suspicion in his own country. Back at the scene of the arrest, more officers had arrived. A supervisor, a second patrol car, and the woman in the blue scarf had not stopped filming. Her name was Tanya Bennett, a local school teacher who had just finished grading papers at the cafe when she witnessed what happened. She had seen, too, many stories like this on the news. She never thought she would be part of one. "This man didn't do anything," she told the second officer. "You should be talking to your partner, not putting your hands on an innocent person." The supervisor, Sergeant Morales, approached her. "Ma'am, we appreciate your concern, but we'll review everything. If you could just send us that footage, we'll—" "I'm not sending anything right now," Tanya said. "But I'm keeping the video, and I've already sent a copy to a friend just in case." She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Meanwhile, in the cruiser, Jason sat quietly. His mind shifted back to his last deployment, Afghanistan. The air had been dry and full of dust. They had been ambushed outside a village during what was supposed to be a simple supply run. One of his team members had taken a bullet to the leg, and Jason had carried him 2 miles under fire to reach the extraction point. That man's name was Travis. They still talked. Travis had always said, "If I ever see someone mess with you, I'll remind them who you are." Jason wondered what Travis would say now. The car finally pulled into the station. Jason was led. Inside, past other officers, some who gave curious glances, some who looked away. Haskins marched him down the hallway like he had something to prove. Like putting cuffs on a man who stood taller, calmer, and more grounded than him, gave him some kind of edge. But the tension in the room shifted slightly when they reached the booking desk. The officer behind the desk looked up at Jason, then back at Haskins. "You got a reason for bringing this guy in?" "Loitering. Suspicious behavior," Haskins said. The desk officer raised an eyebrow. "And?" "Didn't comply. Gave me attitude. Might have something on him," Haskins added. Jason stood silent. The officer turned back to him. "Sir, do you have anything you'd like to say?" Jason met his eyes. "I was on the phone with my mother. I gave him my ID, told him I was Navy, that's all." The officer paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "Navy? SEAL," Jason replied. There was a long silence. The desk officer looked at Haskins again. "Did you verify?" "I was about to," Haskins muttered, but there was a flicker of doubt in his voice now. The room had changed. People were listening. Jason said nothing more. He did not need to. Outside, Tanya was uploading the video to social media, sending it to local news stations. She was not trying to make anyone famous. She was trying to make sure someone listened. She knew how these stories usually went, but maybe this time the truth would come out before things got worse. At that same moment, in a quiet house across town, Jason's mother sat on her couch, trying his phone again and again. Her heart pounded. Something was wrong. Her son always answered, always, and she had heard something in his voice that scared her. She was already grabbing her keys, already on her way to the police station. The story was spreading now, online, across texts, across conversations. People were watching, people were asking, and inside that small police station, Jason stood between the quiet strength of who he was and the loud assumptions of someone who thought power gave him permission. But the truth? The truth was still rising, and it was about to break through. Back in the station, Jason stood in the booking room, silent but not defeated. He watched Haskins pace near the desk, trying to maintain his composure as the room shifted around him. The energy was different now. A couple of officers in the corner were whispering. One of them glanced at Jason, then back at his phone, then leaned into the other's ear. Word was already spreading among them. They had seen the video. Some had already recognized Jason, not from TV or any kind of celebrity, but from past meetings, base functions, or old briefings. He was respected, quiet, but known. The desk officer looked again at the screen in front of him, checking something. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he spoke softly to Haskins. He wasn't armed. No outstanding warrants. Military ID checks out. He's active. SEAL team. Haskins's jaw clenched. He gave me attitude. The other officer leaned forward. Was that before or after you cuffed him for standing outside? Jason could have said something then. He could have spoken up. But he stayed quiet, letting them struggle with the weight of their own actions. His silence made them uncomfortable, and he knew it. He had learned the power of stillness in combat, how silence can speak louder than anger. While this was unfolding, inside, Tanya Bennett was pacing outside the station. Her phone kept buzzing, notifications flying in from people watching the video she had posted. Comments were rolling in. He was calm the whole time. What's that officer doing? Is he really a Navy SEAL? The post was starting to trend locally. Reporters were already messaging her, asking for interviews, asking for statements, but Tanya was not interested in fame. She wanted truth. And she wanted to make sure Jason got out of that building the same way he went in, alive and with his dignity. Inside the lobby, a door opened, and Jason's mother walked in, her coat slipping off one shoulder, her eyes scanning the space. She was small but stood tall in presence. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce. I need to speak with whoever arrested my son. The receptionist looked up, taken slightly aback. Ma'am, do you have a name? Jason Cross. My son is Jason Cross. He called me. Then I heard yelling, then silence. That was over an hour ago. Please have a seat, someone will— No, she said more firmly now. You get someone right now. One of the younger officers who had been quietly watching stepped forward. He had seen the video on his break. His face was stiff with discomfort. Ma'am, I think I can help. Just give me a minute. Back in the booking room, Haskins was starting to sweat. He tried to maintain his authority, but it was slipping fast. Sergeant Morales had entered the room now, summoned by Tanya's video and a few quick internal messages. Morales wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but he could see the writing on the wall, and he could hear it in Jason's voice when he finally chose to speak. I've served 18 years, seen places most people never will, buried friends, saved lives. And today I stood on a sidewalk calling my mother, and you decided that was a threat. Morales turned toward Haskins slowly. Did he ever raise his voice? No, but he looked at me like he didn't need to listen. You felt threatened by his expression? Haskins's face was red now. He wasn't following instructions. Morales took a deep breath. Sometimes people don't follow instructions because they're trying to understand why you're giving them in the first place. You're telling me you didn't recognize his uniform? I don't memorize every patch, but you didn't stop either. Meanwhile, Tanya had made her way into the station's front lobby, after being allowed in by another officer who had recognized her from the video. She found Jason's mother standing by the desk, hands clasped tightly together. When they made eye contact, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a shared weight. I saw it happen, Tanya said softly. He didn't do anything wrong. Thank you, his mother whispered. You don't know how much that means. In a nearby office, 2 detectives reviewed the footage Tanya had posted. The station's inbox had flooded with it already. Complaints were being filed. News crews were calling. It was all happening fast, but not fast enough to undo the damage. Still, the question remained, what was Haskins really trying to prove? Back in the hallway, Haskins stood outside the room, speaking with someone on the phone in a low voice. His hand trembled slightly as he tried to explain his version of the story. He was uncooperative. I didn't know who he was. It wasn't racial. Don't twist it like that. But even he could feel the truth pressing in. His words were shaky, and deep down he knew he had made a mistake. A big one. In another wing of the building, a quiet conversation was taking place between Morales and another high-ranking officer. We need to handle this right, Morales said. Not just because of the press, but because we were wrong. The other officer nodded slowly. Start the internal review, and keep him here until I speak with him myself. The clock kept ticking, but for Jason, it felt like standing in a waiting room between 2 very different versions of America. One that saluted him for his uniform overseas, and one that looked past the medals, past the service, and just saw skin. In his mind, he kept flashing back to Afghanistan. Not the chaos or gunfire, but a moment that had always stayed with him. A local child had wandered into their secure area. Jason had crouched, smiled, and offered the boy a protein bar. No fear, no yelling, just understanding. And yet here, in his own country, he could not even stand outside a cafe without being questioned, pushed, and cuffed. That contrast burned deep. Outside, the sun had started to dip low, casting long shadows across the street. People had gathered now. Not protesters, not yet, but neighbors, onlookers. Passers-by who had seen the video, who wanted to know what was happening. Some held their phones up. Others just stood, quietly watching, like they were waiting for someone to do the right thing. Tanya stepped back outside, watching the crowd build. "They're coming," she said into her phone. "And they're not going to forget this." Inside, Jason sat once again, no longer cuffed, but still held. Morales returned to the room, pulled up a chair, and sat across from him. "Mr. Cross, I've seen your record, your service. I've also seen the video." Jason looked up, calm, but direct. "Then you know this isn't about my record." Morales nodded slowly. "It's about how easily this happened, and how many times it has." Jason did not respond right away. He stared at the floor for a moment, then back at Morales. "I've been trained to survive war zones, but what do I do when the danger is standing 10 feet away in a uniform that's supposed to protect me?" That question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, and outside those station walls, more people were beginning to ask the very same thing.